Time for markets now, and last week we had some breaking news regarding a second round of Market Facilitation Program aid from the USDA. Now, this will be a direct payment to eligible producers to offset the pains of the ongoing trade war with China. We've got lots to break down with this topic, so on Tuesday I was joined by Dr. Scott Irwin, an agricultural economist at the University of Illinois, to discuss what options you have.
I think it's useful to think about it from two different levels. One level is if you can and will plant, the way the program will operate is that it's a direct payment to everyone in a county at exactly the same rate. So if all crops are getting the same payment in a county, then strangely enough, even though we don't know what that amount is, even if we knew it, you would reach the same decision. You wouldn't change what you're going to plant because all crops get the same payment. On a second level, however, and this is where the really big uncertainty was introduced by the MFP2 announcement, is that the new program apparently, although we do not have the final word on this, is coupled with respect to the plant, no plant. In other words, you have to plant something in 2019 to be eligible for the MFP2 payment, whatever it turns out to be.
And for a lot of farmers here in Nebraska who want to take advantage of that MFP aid, the choice that they're trying to make is things like, do I try and plant corn late, or do I pivot toward soybeans, or maybe do I want to plant a less expensive crop? Do any of those options appeal to you more than another?
Well, the good news is for those Nebraska farmers that are in a position where they can plant something and they have that option, they should just go with whatever the market economics dictate, and that is a complicated decision like it is in every year based on a particular farmer's circumstances, costs, rent. There's no hard and fast rule about what should be done at this point, other than I'm pretty confident that the planting date research in Nebraska is probably not that different than here in Illinois. And in particular, if you're faced with planting corn, in particular after the first few days of June, that is a very risky enterprise in terms of what kind of yield hit you might take, running into harvesting and maturity problems in the fall, drying costs. So that would be my advice. Any situation where you're looking at planting, after the first few days of June, think it through really, really carefully.
And I wanted to go back to corn planting for a second. You've also authored that new report where you studied the implications of late corn planting. Is there anything else from that report that you'd like to share?
Well, I think, honestly, we're all a little bit breathless after the crop progress report today came in. As of May 26th, we had 58% of the U.S. corn crop planted, which means that there's, roughly speaking, 39 million acres of corn unplanted right now, maybe in the last couple of days.
Do we even have anything to compare that to?
No, there really isn't anything in at least the last 40 years of data that I've looked at. This is really unprecedented. I took a look last week at the 3 years in the 90s, which are comparable in terms of the degree of late planting the way I define it, which is as of May 20th, and that was 1993, 1995, and 1996. As of May 20th, the amounts of late planting, the amount of corn after that date, was comparable in those 3 years in the 90s to what we're experiencing in 2019. But what is startling and different about this year, 2019, compared to those years of really late planting in the 90s, is that decent to really good windows opened up in those years in the 90s in the last 10 days of May and very early June, and pretty much got both the corn and soybean crops planted in decent shape by the 5th of June. And right now, after the rains this week, the measures that I'm looking at, excess topsoil moisture reading as of Sunday is the highest I've ever seen in the data. So the prospects look really grim, at least for the next week or 10 days, of making much more progress in the U.S. on corn and soybean planting.
Yeah, final question, any final thoughts, advice, or marketing tips for folks watching that you'd like to share?
Well, until today, I would have said hold on to all your corn, don't sell any corn, and sell beans. But the market today is showing quite a bit of life on soybeans, which I still find a little puzzling. Personally, I'm still, even from these price levels, pretty bullish on corn. Beans, I'm neutral to a bit bearish. I still have a hard time seeing that we won't end up with more bean acres total than we had in the March 30th prospective plantings report. Just going to see lots, we've got 39 million acres of corn, some X million of those are going to end up in soybeans. The soybean plant dates are much later than for corn. So, and the weather forecasts right now are maybe finally around mid-June for a decent planting window to finally open up. And at that point, I think the vast majority of people are just going to say, who haven't planted by that date, that we're planting soybeans. So I'm a little skeptical of the run-up in soybean prices right now, even though I realize planting soybeans that late also takes a substantial yield hit, but we can plant a lot of acres of soybeans yet.